Hello. All right, so I want to talk about The Bee Sting, the novel by Paul Murray, who I read in the book. I read The Bee Sting thanks to Tyson. And Tyson and I have already talked about the book on a couple of occasions, but I wanted to make one more video to give myself a little bit more room to reflect on it and its significance, and the reasons why I might read it again next year. I would hesitate recommending it, even though I would love to recommend it to other people and I would love to read and discuss it with more people. But the novel has more than 700 pages. It is pretty long. It's a big commitment. And aside from the length of the work, it's also difficult to read. It has some very strong tragic elements in it, in the story, and some people might find it at some points not rewarding as a kind of piece of entertainment or something to read to relax. At the moment, I am reading another book by Laura Bates, and this book is important because it talks about why we read, why we engage with works of literature. And a lot of it is implied, a lot of it is implicit. But my way of summarizing the reasoning is, there's this in Laura Bates's book, Shakespeare Saved My Life. There is this prisoner. It's based on a real story. It is telling a true story of an inmate, a criminal, who was in a maximum security prison, solitary confinement for about 10 years. And he used a lot of that time, a lot of that solitude to understand and read again, reread Shakespeare. And so he almost became an experiment in reading, in slowing down, in slow reading. And when he talks about his experience of reading, he talks about how you have to relate to, it's not enough to just go over a work by Shakespeare and say, okay, this character, let's say Macbeth, he made this mistake and I'm learning from this mistake. Oh, what a silly guy. Gave into temptation, forgot the consequences of his action or neglected the consequences. Or look at these silly, ignorant young people, teenagers, who fall in love and they think that they can just have what they want, that they think that love is enough. It's not that, okay, nice lesson, a nice story, I draw this lesson and, don't make the mistake of those people. This prisoner, this guy, Larry Newton says that's to other inmates. He became such an expert that he started teaching Shakespeare to other prisoners, other former criminals, recovering criminals. He said you shouldn't say, okay, that guy is there, Macbeth is there, I'm here. I'm not really like him. I won't repeat what he did. Instead, you should relate to the characters. You should relate to the story. You should find the mechanism that is being portrayed in the story, that is being explored. The mechanism of, for example, choosing ego versus conscience, or giving into what you think you're supposed to do. You're haunted by this ghost. Whatever the ghost is, it could be social pressure. It could be the voice of the father that tells you should take revenge, or whatever that is haunting you, that is pushing you. Maybe your wife is telling you should kill the king and take his place. The things that you're supposed to do, that's the mechanism that Shakespeare is exploring. And if you really understand it, if you relate to it, we won't say that lesson is there, I won't get close to it, I won't fall into that trap. Understanding it and relating to it, succeeding to relate to it, to see the truth of it, to find the truth of that mechanism, how things are connected to each other, cause and effect, what causes what, causes and consequences. It allows us to see how intimately we are already involved with what Shakespeare is exploring, how we are already living in that world, how we are already participants in such a story, in a very similar kind of story that has those mechanisms already in play. We're already in it. It's not that lesson is there. I'm here. I'm safe from it. Wow, what a cautionary tale. And I'm like, I'm safe. Thank God I'm safe. It's not that way. It's the recognition that we are already living that. We're already living the kind of story that Shakespeare talks about. Okay, now with that extensive introduction, let's turn to the main book I want to talk about, The Bee Sting. The phenomena or mechanisms. Mechanism is not, maybe it's not the most appropriate word. I get the word mechanism. I use it in a sense of a particular social scientist who uses it very carefully, and that social scientist is Jon Elster, who wrote the book Explaining Social Behavior. He doesn't use it in the same way that cognitive psychologists or neuroscientists use it. He doesn't refer to mechanism as a universal law. For example, one of the mechanisms that he talks about is the sour grapes. You know, there's something that a person wants to gain. They realize that they cannot get it, and this mechanism of sour grapes kicks in and causes them to, in their mind, causes them to have a lower perception, to ascribe a lower value, a lower sense of desirability in that goal that they know they cannot get. So that's, you see, there's a progression of things that happen in time, and things cause each other. There's a causal chain. So that's the kind of mechanism I'm talking about when I'm talking about Larry Newton and Laura Bates understanding Shakespeare and talking about Shakespeare and relating to a work of literature in general. Now, The Bee Sting, Paul Murray, there are many different ways of reading this book. The book is it's really about family. And what is a family? You know, I've been thinking about this question a lot. I've been thinking about why family is why family is important, in what way it is important, why family has doesn't have the strong role it used to play in our lives, in people's lives. What is a family? Who's a family member? I mean, one way to think about a family member or family when somebody is your family is that if something happens to them, good or bad, it affects you. Now, I'm trying to refute that definition, and I think it's an acceptable way of thinking about family. So, if somebody is family, events that happen in their lives, drastic events, good or bad, they have consequence on me. I'm kind of attached with them. I'm associated with them. I'm tied with them. We can use the phrase sharing a common fate. When you're family with someone, when you're part of a family, you share a common fate with them. Now, you might have your own individual fate, but there's a commonality, there's overlap. In the two fates, there is a bit of overlap between them. So when you choose to get married with someone, when you realize you're so close to one of your friends that they're almost a family, I think the common fate, the shared fate, the shared destiny, I think that applies. And in families, I think participating in family, in fact, isn't as simple as that kind of recognition that you have a common fate with someone. Growing up in a family involves, inevitably, the desire to escape that common fate. And teenagers, stereotypically, or young adults, they would like to go beyond that fate that they perceive their family to have. They want to go to a big city, the bigger city or small city, whatever, the location that their family is not there. They want to establish their own fate. or they want to extend that the horizon within which their fate is going to take shape. And at first, that is it is a struggle. It's a struggle that no, I'm not going to be determined by these people or by this person. Maybe it's just one child and one mother, or one child and one parent. And it's just a simple resistance that I'm not going to be determined by you, parent. I'm not just going to be your child. There's going to be more to my life than just being your child. So that's a kind of dynamic that has a place within family that actually can happen. That's part of what being a family is like. So I've been thinking about this. Like, there are two characters who decide to get married in the Bee Sting. And the question that I thought about, I'm still thinking about, like, was that a mistake? They're getting married. Was that, did they make a mistake? Were they confused when they made that decision? And if you think that, okay, they got married, they became family because they recognize that they already share a common fate. In some sense, they already do share. They're already vulnerable to the consequences of this one event that happened in both of their lives. And they kind of affirm that. They decide to affirm that commonality, the consequence that they shared. And they became a family. So I don't think that it makes sense for that decision of a marriage, because marriage is a really, it's a really special kind of decision, especially in our time, but not exclusively in our time. Because family is initially something that is given to us. We have to come to terms with it. We have to deal with it. But then there's this special decision that creates and extends family. All of a sudden you have an extended family. So this act of extension is also important. I think we can explore it with the help of this novel. The other thing I mentioned, I just mentioned this, that the lack of harmony, that there are tensions between, for example, children and their parents in the way they are relating and the way they are accepting the fate of what they are perceiving to be their family. So there are disagreements, and then there is that. In addition to that, there's that ongoing communication. Family members must talk to each other to stay family, to stop becoming delusional. I think. I mean, that's how family members. I think it makes sense for them. It sounds so obvious, but is it problematic to say that? Is it problematic to say part of being a family is to stay in touch, to stay in contact? But sometimes we don't do that. And when we don't do that, we are still family members, but there's a wall between the two sides. And the presence of that wall, or the absence of a connection, leads family members to be alone. And as Tyson described it as they suffer alone. And their pain acquires a higher degree of intensity because they cannot communicate with each other. Because that lack of communication, lack of understanding, the fact that the other family member doesn't understand my pain, doesn't know what's going on, I can't ask for help, that itself becomes a pain, and that prolongs the initial pain. For that reason, there's also a desire to connect. There's a desire to break the wall or destroy the wall and build a bridge. To cross the threshold. And crossing the threshold is a huge theme. I mean, other than family, if family is not it's not a central theme, if it is not the central theme, then threshold should be the central theme. Because so much of the novel is about remaining in the threshold, wanting to say something and not being able to say it, hesitating. Page after page, you're hesitating, you're daydreaming about the right moment to say something. Even the very end, this is not a spoiler. I hope it's not a spoiler. But the very end of the novel is a crossing of a threshold. Actually, two crossings of the thresholds. One is a constructive crossing between siblings. They cross the threshold and they find each other Almost like, you know, when you talk to someone that you're not talking with, it's almost like you're finding each other again. It's like your relationship becomes conscious again. The relationship was in a coma. It was like in kind of a coma. There was a heaviness there, like the heaviness of a person who is asleep, the sleeping beauty. Now the sleeping beauty is awake, and there's more lightness in the room. There's a joy of, yes, we find each other again. You're here, I'm here. So that crossing of a threshold takes such a long time for the two people to start communicating, to understand, to get on the same page. But there's also another crossing of a threshold, which is a misunderstanding, and it has a different kind of consequence. We can also create thresholds. I think this is also something that is explored or happens in the novel. When there's a bride, one of the characters, at their wedding, they put this veil on top of their face, in front of their face. They're covered, a veil. And this veiling it's hiding something, telling a story about why they're hiding their face, and creating the necessity of someone to someday maybe crossing this threshold, the potential to learn, the potential to learn about this secret, this family secret. Every secret, and family is really has a bunch of secrets going on in the family. Every secret is a wall. It acts as a wall. It acts as a force for isolating, separating family members from each other. And not just family members, but also friends. Like there were two friends. At some point, there's the Dickie and Willie. And something happens to Dickie, and he wants to tell Willie about it, but he doesn't. But he kind of wants to. By not telling him, he builds that wall. Years go by. He still wants to connect with Willie. And he starts, instead of reaching out, he starts to build these new walls, these new persona, new deceptive moves in order to get close while at the same time not getting close. Okay, so one of my notes here is gaps in family. There seems to be almost like I don't want to say moral lesson, but again, going back to mechanism. The mechanism here, I think Paul Murray is trying to flesh out, is a mechanism that begins with failure of a family, where a child or anybody else, they're not connecting, they don't have their needs met, they don't have their emotional, personal needs, the needs that maybe a family is supposed to meet. A family is supposed to address these needs. You know, we created you, we gave birth to you. Now we're going to, for some time, for a few years, satisfy these needs for you, these social needs, emotional needs, and teach you about what these needs are. When somebody is unfortunate and those things don't happen to them, it's not just that they are unsatisfied, it's that they don't learn enough about their needs and what it takes to satisfy them and how they are supposed to be satisfied. So these failures create gaps or fractures in family. And these fractures make people in these conditions prey to predators. So some predators, some people who are so-called evil, some people who want to take advantage, who want to instrumentalize people, use them as things for the sake of their own satisfaction. They can come in and take advantage of a person who has a gap, for lack of better terms. It's such a weird way of talking about it, but if there's a gap in the family, a person can come and take advantage of that gap and deceive a teenager and try to take advantage of them in some way. I think family also allows people to gain, one of the things that we learn about ourselves and what we need is the need for self-regard and self-respect. And people who don't learn that, I mean, when we don't learn that, when we forget that, isn't that a huge weakness? Isn't that a huge vulnerability? Isn't that just a disaster waiting to happen? I don't know. This is, I think, a very salient theme for Paul Murray. And I think so much so that this leads to a major criticism of this book from my perspective. So why is this novel almost a great work of literature, but not 100%? Why it is not a masterpiece, I think. And I might revise this position. But for now, I think it is, the reason why it is not a masterpiece is that Murray is really insistent on giving us this moral lesson. He has a moral lesson to teach. He wants to leave us with this cautionary note that kids need to have self-respect, kids need to have boundary, kids need to have love from their home, and all the other things that go along with that. You know, ties within family, communication, connection, you know, staying up to date with what is going on with the people that you are connected with, people that you share a common faith with. And so because he wants to give that lesson, because he cares so much about this lesson, he allows that lesson to dominate his storytelling, dominates his narrative. There's a lot of, I feel at some points there's more than necessary amount of engineering in the storytelling. I was like, see, they didn't pay attention to him and he is left in the big city, vulnerable to these evil people. I mean, you can tell that story in a way that is natural maybe, but, and maybe the way Paul Murray told the story is natural, but I didn't feel that. I didn't feel that. It's a puzzle. It really is a puzzle. So I don't know what to do with that right now. But in general, again, I repeat, family, threshold, connection, communication, shared fate. And what happens when you have a family that has ties, connections, lines of communications that are deteriorating? What happens as a result of that is that people lose touch with a reality of each other, the way family members, the others, are seeing reality. And that inevitably results in delusion, in them being individually deluded, having wrong beliefs about what is going on. Not just about the objective, I mean, what is the objective reality? The perspective of others. The perspective of others is part of our objective reality. It's about part of what we need to know to be in contact with reality. What's going on with other people? When we are out of touch with that, we are out of touch with reality. We are deluded because we assume something that is not the case. We assume maybe safety of other people. We assume that they're comfortable, they're not in pain, they're not anxious, you know, whatever we assume. And the bee stinks, you know. The bee stink. I think maybe it is a metaphor of, we get to a point where our acts of love, unbeknownst to us, unknowingly, we put ourselves in a position where our acts of love become acts of destruction, because we are not in the know. We don't know enough. Okay, that's I think that's enough. It was very messy, so thank you for listening. If you did, let me know what you think, and let me know if you're interested in reading this book with me in 2024. Until then.